Buenas noches. Hello. Hi. My goodness. Thank you. Welcome. My name is Rosalba Rolón, and I'm artistic director of Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theatre. And no, you. Thank you all, really, really. Welcome to this special gathering of friends, colleagues, and fans of one of the Bronx's most celebrated figures over the past decades. We call it a celebration, a remembrance, as we pay homage to a poet that left us a rich legacy of a repertoire of poetic imagery that will continue to inspire us, to move us to reflection and action. We are honored at Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theatre to welcome you as we take this journey together in honor of Bobby Gonzalez. Yes. And so one day I received a call from someone very special to all of us. And of course, that was the easiest yes we've ever given anyone. Please join me as we welcome activist, leader, autora, and Bobby's beloved wife, Maria Aponte.
Hello, welcome everyone for coming out tonight so we celebrate Bobby. I took a leap of faith when I contacted Rosalba to ask if we could have a panel to celebrate his work from different areas, and yes, it was the fastest yes. So I would like to thank all the people who are coming to celebrate him. And just a little bit about the Bobby Gonzalez Legacy Project. I created this to collect and organize to present Bobby's work in areas of Taino history, storytelling, diversity, inclusion, and poetry. The overall goal is to create an interactive digital link that can be accessed in museums and offered to school, colleges, and universities as a teaching tool. The goal of this project, oh boy, would to see it coming in to the academic years, 2025, 2026, and my overall dream, and I know this is a dream, but if you don't put it out there in the universe, it doesn't happen, is to have an exhibit of his work on display at the Native American Indian Museum, where he did a lot of work. So on tonight's event, I'd like to thank my poets who said yes, Caridad de la Luz, a.k.a. La Bruja, Jesus Papoleto Melendez for saying, what do you want? And I asked them because I wanted to pick poets who knew Bobby, knew his work. Papoleto and Bobby go back decades, from the late 80s, early 90s, working together. Bobby always considered Caridad one of his daughters. And I want to thank my panelists who are going to be sharing tonight. So I'm going to run through this so that we can get the show started. So, Caridad de la Luz won an Emmy in 2022 after becoming the executive director of the New Yorican Poets Cafe, where she began her career in 1996. Winner of the Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship, David Prize finalist, Caridad balances a career of activism, education, entertainment. She has been one of America's leading spoken word poets for over 20 years, has received the Edgar Allan Poe Award from the Bronx Historical Society, and she was honored at the Bronx Living Legend by the Bronx Music Heritage Center and was named Top 20 Puerto Rican Women Everyone Should Know. Jesus Papoleto Melendez, who I've known since the 1980s, because I started out at the New Eurekan in the late 70s, early 80s. Also known as Papo or Papoleto, is a New York-born Puerto Rican poet, playwright, teacher, and activist. He is the member of the New Eurekan movement. He grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, Black Power movement, and the emergence of the New Eurekan movement in East Harlem, El Barrio, and is one of the founding poets of the New Eurekan poetry movement. My panelists. Ms. Robin Bady is an award-winning storyteller and arts educator with over 35 years of experience performing all over the world. A true multi-hyphenated storyteller, actress, director, writer, teacher, Robin has dedicated her craft to inspiring others in the more personal human way we know through stories. Robin is not limited to storytelling. She's deeply personal storytelling with Moth Slam. She performs for the families, children, and adults in venue large and small. She has a one-woman show called Nancy Drewski, which is actually a very powerful piece on examining what her parents' life was like during the McCarthy era in the 1950s. My second panelist will not be with us tonight. Yvette Martinez unfortunately became ill. So my next panelist, Regina Larkin. Regina Larkin is a seventh-generation American, was a professional dancer, choreographer, professor at Adelphi University, artistic director of the Joyce Tressler Dance Company, and faculty at Alvin Ailey and Elliott Field Ballet Tech Schools. After touring, Ms. Larkin became the manager of education for Symphony Space, Global Arts, Cultural Literacy, and Heritage Program in 2006. My third panelist is Ricardo Gabriel. Ricardo is a visiting assistant professor of sociology at Trinity College, where he teaches classes on social movements, environmental, climate justice, and colonization. He has been active in the pro-independence Puerto Rico politics in the US since 1999, and he recently completed his PhD in sociology from the CUNY Graduate Centers in September 23. Who's going to be on video at the end of the panel? His name is Jorge Estevez, one of Bobby's mentees. Kasike, Jorge Baracutay Estevez is Taino from the island of Quisqueya, Haiti, Santo Domingo. Estevez worked at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indians for 25 years as a volunteer contractor and museum program specialist. During his time at the NMAI, he worked on more than 400 public programs featuring indigenous people from North, South, Central America, as well as the Caribbean. In 2009, he formed a research group, Higuayagua, dedicated. Please say that for me. Higuayagua. Wepa. Dedicated to learning about indigenous Caribbean culture, language, and spiritual traditions. He and his tribe, el nombre otra vez? Muchísimas gracias. Taino tribe have created a dictionary. Here I go. Higuayagua, Hekeshi Taino Dictionary of their efforts to rebuild the language. I'm sorry, I was born and raised on 117th Street and 2nd, and the woman that birthed me insisted English was my first language. Okay, now, little confession there. So to open up the evening, can't think of a better way than to have poetry. So please help me welcome Papoleto up to read Bobby's poem, Thank You, Mr. Columbus.
Gracias, Maria, Rosalba, and thank you all for coming this evening. Don't Bobby. Yeah, Bobby. No, Bobby's here tonight. We have that. Okay, here you go. Thank you, Mr. Columbus. Thank you, all his colleagues and all of your descendants who carry on his mission. Thank you for the blessings with us. Termination, relocation, subjugation, assimilation, acculturation, and detribalization. Thank you, Mr. Columbus, for blessing us with regulation, retaliation, reorganization, reclamation, taxation, and alienation. Thank you, Mr. Columbus, for blessing us with domination, dissemination, resignation, confiscation, desecration, and elimination. Thank you, Mr. Columbus, for blessing us with castration, decapitation, penetration, sterilization, exploitation, and dehumanization. Thank you, Mr. Columbus, for blessing us with depopulation, humiliation, extermination, separation, indoctrination, discrimination, isolation, and violation. For these bounteous benedictions, we thank thee. May you and yours be one day equally blessed. Thank you, Mr. Columbus.
Okay, so you got the glasses? Okay. So our first panelist is going to be Robin Bady. And Robin and Bobby go back many decades as storytellers and as good friends. And I couldn't think of a better person than Robin to have her come in. So my first question, Robin, you and Bobby go back a long time as friends and colleagues. As storytellers, you both have performed together. Can you give us an example of Bobby's storytelling style, or is there one?
Well, let's see. Bobby and I go back to when we were both teaching together, and he taught me all about Taino, which I'd never heard the word. And the thing I love about Bobby is he didn't shame me, which is easy to feel ashamed when you don't know something. And in a way, that's part of Bobby's style of performing. He is so open. He was so open, friendly. And even when he was angry in what he was saying, you could not escape it. Gosh, I wrote some stuff down because I always sort of forget. Bobby and I, after 9/11, Bobby and I got together, and he was the only other storyteller I knew in New York at that point, and probably that I knew at all. And we created a group called Shirazade's Children that went into all the libraries throughout New York City, and we got together with about another 5 other people. So there were about 7 or 8 of us and a musician. And we traveled in pairs of 2 or 3, groups of 3, and told stories. And the most important thing was to tell stories of hope and to show that even though we were a multicultural group, some of us, well, actually, very few of us were white. There were a lot of brown people. Also, we'd go in groups so we could see, people could see how much we liked each other and how our stories played upon each other. And that was Bobby. He was a generous performer. He was a loving performer. When he was with children, he'd bring all sorts of puppets. I remember the first time I said, "Why are you bringing puppets?" He goes, "Wait to see what happens." That was Bobby, and you know, I saw. It was beautiful, and I miss him. I miss being able to talk to him about things, about storytelling, because he was one of the best ears that I have had to just talk about the mechanics and talk about what we think and feel about what's going on. He had a very conversational style. He had, you know, you hear it in his poetry. He was talking to you. And it was the same thing with adults when he told. I think he mostly told with children, at least that was my experience, but I saw him also telling with adults, and I managed to do a few things with him that were to adults, and he was just right present. It was, this is my story. What do you think? You know, and how do you feel? And somehow, you know, to me, among the greatest thing you can do as a storyteller is have you tell a story and you open up an experience. And the listeners aren't listening, they're experiencing it. And that's what Bobby did. And that's why he was a great partner to work with. And that's why he was a great friend. Is there anything more you want me to say about him?
Actually, no, you answered both questions in one as a storyteller.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to talk about the poetry? Oh, it's too bad. Now you got a storyteller talking. Okay. I'm just going to go and say the one thing I saw about his poetry, the first time I heard him, I just remember walking into this place and I didn't even know what we were doing. We had just met Maria and okay, and I could talk about that. But I just remember watching him get up in this round of people around him, listening in on you know, every word that he said, and the way he spoke directly to them. It was really very much like the children, except it was heightened. And that's a big gift. That's a gift of a great storyteller.
Thank you, Robin. Robin Bady. So what we're doing with the program this evening is we're alternating between the panelists answering the questions and our poets. So I would like to invite up, I can't stand right now, but to up to the stand, my beautiful amiguita, powerful lady, Caridad de la Luz, la Bruja.
Anakaona. She sits on the earthen floor, her wrists and ankles fettered by iron chains. She sits motionless, absolutely still, with her eyes shut tight, as her breath comes and goes in long and measured, silent flows. She is the poet queen of Haiti. And now she squats alone in a hut, chained in darkness, with only the damp floor of Mother Earth to comfort her. She begins to release tears that fall to the ground like offerings to the great bleeding mother, La Madre Tierra, Itiba ka ubaba. She cries tears of sorrow for a daughter who will not have a mother to teach and to love her. She cries tears of sorrow for the children who will now have to endure a life of cruel enslavement. And she cries tears of anguish for the earth of her island that will no longer be tenderly cared for by the only people who are sensitive to her ways and to her needs. And then she begins to hum. And then she begins to chant. She chants the poem song that had been sung on the morning that she was born. She chants the poem song that had been sung on the day she became a woman and was given a new name. And she chants the poem song that had been sung on the day when she felt the labor pains that seemed to tear her body apart. And then she begins to sing and cry with joy, knowing that she will soon be walking in the radiant spirit land where the ancient ones dwell. But for now, she sits alone on the earthen floor of a hut, her wrists and ankles fettered by iron chains. She sits, waiting to be hanged. And the moon in the sky turns blood red in anger as the poet queen squats on the earthen floor alone. Anakaona, Anakaona.
Thank you, Caridad. That was, wow. Our next panelist is Regina Larkin from Symphony Space. And my first question, Regina, is can you give a short description of Symphony Space Global Arts Program that Bobby participated in?
Thank you, Maria. If I project, is this all right? Yes. Use the microphone, please. Okay, you got it. Well, education at Symphony Space is a multidisciplinary arts education hub where traditional and contemporary cultural art forms are explored and celebrated, and participants make meaning of their place in the world by telling their own stories through the arts, whether it's music, dance, theater, storytelling, visual art. We embrace that as well as many, many cultures. Beginning in 2006, Bobby Gonzalez helped us with participating in the Latin America Studies program and helped to develop it. He went into classrooms throughout the boroughs. He did after-school programs and graced our stage in the Latin America interactive field trip performances with narrations and telling stories to thousands and thousands of students.
Thank you. And the second question, as one of the artists in the Global Arts Program that Bobby was a part of for 13 years, how do you feel Bobby's work as a storyteller with the children at various schools he presented made a difference culturally for the students and the teacher?
Absolutely. Well, in 5th grade, in social studies, the students very often study about Latin America. So that was one of the grades and a certain kind of program that we presented. But something the teachers, children, and our team really loved about Bobby was how adaptable he was with diverse participants. He was a master of words and helped ESL, English Second Language, English language learners, special education, or dual language classes by defining the origins and meanings of certain words used in his imaginative stories. By conducting classes both in Spanish and English, so many could relate to him. He would emphasize the importance of students asking their families, especially their grandmothers, to tell them stories they heard when growing up so they could share these stories and keep the family legacies alive. Bobby used props and puppets when he told his creative tales. To quote a principal at PS 25K, she shared this with me. I wanted you to know that our art teacher was inspired by seeing Bobby Gonzalez use puppets for the children to tell their stories. She is now having the children to make paper bag puppets, and the kids are so inspired and imaginative making them. I also loved how Bobby was responsible to share with me the ongoings at the school when I couldn't make it to his workshop. This is one at 25K. It was definitely a tough gig. Jerbian, who's here with me, you know PS 25K, the challenge is there. He said, the marathon is complete, 15 weeks of storytelling. It was fun, challenging, and enlightening. I developed new tools for workshops and look forward to future residencies at other schools. There was a summer rising program, maybe some of you have heard, and Bobby did one over at PS 40. He reported, we had fun today and all the children are telling me stories. These children are not afraid to tell stories. I had a monkey puppet today, and one boy made up a story about monkeys that protect and warn the elephants of any danger. At the end of his story, he did cheetah calls. Two girls named Winter and Summer are inseparable, and they are the best storytellers. I will have a hard time deciding which children will perform their stories for the pop-up performance. I try to boost their confidence. For example, one little boy who has not spoken a word the entire time asked me if he could tell a story today. He stood up in front of everyone and just smiled. I told him that was a good story, and I was so proud that he actually got up in front of his class. And then we often went to PS 334 in Manhattan. He said, we've been going there so long that the teacher, Nicole Chardonnay, told the students that in 3 years, when they're in the 8th grade, they will be writing original stories similar to mine. She has been doing this for some time. I could go on and on of how sensitive and unbelievably great he was for our program. We haven't replaced him yet. We somehow can't. We haven't found anyone such as he. So they get capoeiro, which is good. But anyhow, we love him and we miss him. Thank you, Maria.
He always came home and would tell me the story about whatever was going on with the kids. And whenever he was getting ready to go to the schools, at that time I was still working at Fordham, and I would come home tired, and the entire living room covered with puppets. And I would just look, and I'd look at him, and then I would say, I knew when I called my godmother and told me I met my husband that I was going to marry the puppet man. And so that was his style. He would start thinking about what he wanted to tell, what stories he wanted to tell, pull out the puppet. There was a method. It wasn't random. I just wish he had a method for organizing all those pieces of papers I have to fix in his closet. But he had a method. And then he would ask me what I would think about, what do you think, should I take the turtle? And I'm like, I just got out of a meeting where they're trying to figure out whether the school has racism on campus, and you're asking me about a damn turtle. And that is why we were happily married, because we both came from different directions. And now I have to ask my lady, Caridad, if she could do double duty due to the fact that one of our panelists was not able to make it. We had to switch around the program. So Caridad, I wanted to ask if you would be able to come up and read your Altavera poem for us. Si se puede.
This is Bobby's poem, right? The Atabeira. Yes. So, it was, well, I'll speak more about my connection to Bobby, and I'll just read his work for the moment. But here we go. I hope I do this justice here. Atabeira Guacarapita. Con el permiso de mis antepasados, with the permission of my ancestors, Atabeira Guacarapita es mi madre diosa. Atabey Mamona is my mother goddess. Nuestros hermanos africanos rezan a Yemayá, madre de todos los orishas. Our African sisters and brothers pay homage to Yemayá, but we the Tainos of Boriquén, y Quisqueya, y Cuba call Atabeira our mother of the waters. Nuestra madre de las aguas, Madre Diosa, Mother Goddess, Mother Creator, Mother Protector, Mother of us all. She purifies the ocean with her tears. She sanctifies the earth with her holy menstrual blood. First teacher. Her original name is unspeakable, and all mothers endure pain unknowable to man. Atabeira, Guacarapita, el ritmo de la naturaleza, the rhythm of nature, red dirt of Boriquén, Atabey Mamona. It has been said that the Creator is much too intelligent to be masculine. Red woman, brown woman, lives at the source. Atabeira Guacarapita, Atabey Mamona. Mother, it is so sad. The trees of the forest know where their roots lie, but our children do not. Ellos no saben de dónde vinieron, ni saben pa dónde van. Atabeira Guacarapita, Atabey Mamona, mistress of the universe, sing soft words of remembrance, ofrendas left on the altar, ofrendas de tabaco, maíz y tabonuco, truth and memory, la verdad y la memoria. Man always forgets that he lacks the strength and patience of a woman. By reason of our color, by reason of the land on which our grandmothers were born, by reason of instructions given to us in dreams and visions, by reasons of whispers that come to us from the future. Hear the words of the wind. Listen to the dancing drum. Atabeira, Guacarapita, el ritmo de la naturaleza, the rhythm of nature, red dirt of Boriquén, Atabey Mamona, the eternal mother of us all.
Caridad. Caridad, you want to do your remarks now or when we do the end section? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So our third panelist, I'm going to be bad. His name is Ricardo Gabriel, but I'm going to mess with him and call him Dr. Gabriel. Freshly minted PhD. Hey, Fordham's in the house. What can I tell you? It's those Jesuits, they did it to me. Okay. Ricardo, my first question. I reread your beautiful post that you left about Bobby, how his work influenced you and inspired you at the Muévete Youth Conference in the mid-1990s when you were a teenager. Throughout the years, you connected with him and his work as a Taino, and it inspired you to become a Puerto Rican studies scholar. Can you give a specific moment that resonates with you today?
Yes, and first of all, thank you for having me, for inviting me, and for organizing this beautiful event. Well, So for background, I should just say that my doctoral dissertation was on the Puerto Rican student movement at CUNY in the 1960s and 70s, and the struggle for Puerto Rican studies. So we have hostos right here across the street. We have Puerto Rican studies departments around the city and the Northeast and in Chicago. Those departments and those programs were the result of student activism, right, and social movements. And so I consider my participation in the Muerte youth conferences of the 1990s my first exposure to Puerto Rican studies. Because like many Puerto Rican youth in New York City at the time, I was very proud to be Puerto Rican, but I knew very little about Puerto Rico or about what it meant to be Puerto Rican, right? So his talk at the conference, the years that I went, I can't remember if it was 1996 or 1998, was on our Taino heritage as Puerto Ricans, and it blew my mind. It was the first time I learned about our indigenous ancestry, and so that really sparked a curiosity in me to learn more. This was at a time where I was, so that happened right in the late 1990s, and we kept in touch. I don't remember how or the context for this, but I brought this with me that I want to show. This is an envelope, a little packet that Bobby sent me on February 5th, 2001. Wow. So we reconnected, we kept in touch somehow, and he sent me this packet with articles that he had written for El Boricua, the Taino Corner, Latino Village Press, from 1997, right? And the note in it says, it's dated February 3rd, 2001. It says, "Hi, Ricardo, here is the info which you requested. My website should be up this week. Its address is bobbygonzalez.com. Good luck in the struggle, Bobby Gonzalez." And so I've kept this in my various bookcases throughout the years as I've learned more and eventually became a Puerto Rican studies scholar myself. And so, besides being a poet, I think of Bobby as an educator, right? That was my interaction with him, and that's how he influenced me a lot as an educator. And so, he sent me this at a time where I was locked out of college. I have a long educational story that I won't get into, but I lost a scholarship that I had at LIU Brooklyn, and I was working various jobs to pay off my debt because they wouldn't release my transcripts. I could transfer until I pay off this debt. And so I was learning a lot on my own, reading about Puerto Rican history, reading more about Taino stuff through Bobby. And then I eventually transferred to Hunter College, where I majored in Puerto Rican studies and joined SLAM, the Student Liberation Action Movement. And so, all that journey to becoming a Puerto Rican studies major and then a Puerto Rican studies scholar really started at Muerte, and Bobby was a big part of that.
So, you ready for the second one?
I'm ready.
Okay. Academia has had its moments of difficulty, especially now that we're dealing with dramatic changes with diversity and inclusion in higher education. Can you tell how Bobby's work and influence has helped you with your students so that they don't lose interest in their cultural paths?
Yeah, so Bobby being an educator, he actually influenced me in my pedagogy and my approach to education in a couple of ways. The first one, going back to that Muerte conference way back in 1998, was besides learning all of these amazing facts about Tainos and our indigenous ancestry and all that stuff, Bobby taught me one of the most important lessons that I've learned from an educator, and it had nothing to do with Taino anything. At the end of his talk, he said, but don't take my word for it, do your own research. And that always stood out to me. There are a lot of dubious claims in the Taino community, a lot of people presenting themselves as authorities, as leaders, and I don't think Bobby would have a problem with me saying that. But Bobby wasn't like that. Bobby was humble. He encouraged us to ask questions. He encouraged critical thinking, and that's what I try to do in my classes. I present information to my students. I don't hide my position on things, on my politics or anything, but I don't impose my views on anybody. I offer information and resources, and I encourage people to think about it, read on their own, study on their own, ask questions. And so the other thing is that how he influenced me is, I'm a sociology professor, but no matter what course I'm teaching, whether it's intro or social movements or whatever, I always incorporate some kind of analysis or acknowledgement of settler colonialism and indigenous studies. And that, beyond just like land acknowledgements or whatever, right? So that consciousness, that awareness for me started with my connection to Bobby.
So, before we move on to our last panelist, which is actually a video, unfortunately, Jorge Estevez is living in Santo Domingo, but he was kind enough to send a video to his questions. I'd like to invite back up to the mic Papoleto to read The Last Puerto Rican Indian.
Right. Dangerous memories, stolen histories, identity theft on a cosmic scale. Who, what determines who, what we are. My grandmother's stories contradicted by the scientific data accumulated by self-righteous, self-appointed academians in university ivory towers. Transmission of knowledge, generation to generation. The last Puerto Rican Indian with an abundance of love bites into the Cuban sandwich on the corner of 145th Street and Brook Avenue. Hungry ghosts wander through forests of ceiba trees and the murky waters of cement-covered lagoons. Hungry ghosts seeking pale imitations of their blood descendants. Hungry ghosts feed on the wind with no fear of change. The master of time rules over the living, the dying. The master of time rules over the horrified, the terrified. The monster of time rules over the being, the feeling. And the last Puerto Rican Indian calls up the wind, calls up the spirits, summons the rain. But then she runs back to her cave in the face of menacing thunder, shielding her eyes with flower-covered hands. Let me tell you about my people. We can be proud, difficult, but yet forever ready. We are seen as being native subversives, but by the powers that be, they who manipulate national, cultural, political, spiritual identities as a means of social control, they who erased us from the historical records in vain attempt to render us impotent. Hey, guess what? There needs to be clarification. Hey, guess what? There needs to be talking to the situation. The last Puerto Rican Indian in tune with spirit of place is able to visualize who, what, she, he really is. Dangerous memories, stolen histories. The last Puerto Rican Indian rebels by refusing to forget. The last Puerto Rican Indian assumes mantle of responsibility and teaches her children suppressed native philosophies. The last Puerto Rican Indian, does she ever wonder? Does he ever see? Some people have forgotten who they are, but the land never forgets. But the ancestors never abandoned their daughters and sons. For the last Puerto Rican Indian has not yet been born. For the last Puerto Rican Indian has not yet been conceived. For the last Puerto Rican Indian raises her arms to the sky and welcomes the day.
Yeah, he was deep. Yep. Anyway, it was nice to hear both of you read his work. So we are up to our video panelists. Can we set up to show Jorge's video? Okay. So this is Jorge Estevez.
Maybe we should get out of the way.
No, no, we're fine.
Usa kasakabo batoma, Kairi le Kasike atuno Baracutay con Catecuas, Lanca y Higuayagua, lan Taino Carilucuno, da Guarico Waria Kairi Lan Kisikeya, Waria Kain Kayeke Haibon, Aluca Sibawiku, Turale Wani, Alaikutaba, Amayaha. It is an honor, a great honor to be here. So I was asked by my sister Maria Aponte to say a few words, or to answer a few questions about my relationship with Bobby. So I'm going to read these questions and then answer them. So our first question number one, George, your love for Bobby was and still is profound. You have always told me that Bobby was your mentor and he helped you with learning about Taino history, culture, and language. Can you give us an example of what it was like in the beginning of what is now the Taino movement? Okay. So personally, I had been involved in the Taino movement since before there was a Taino movement. But in those days, it was quite hard to have a voice, because wherever you presented the topic, you were always shut down, especially in intellectual academic circles. One day, I happened to hear that there was a Taino person named Bobby Gonzalez who was speaking at the Museum of Natural History. And I had to go see who this person was. I was expecting some kind of stuffy scholar, perhaps. But instead, what I found was a man very much like myself, and speaking as a layman, but a layman that had done profound research. And that inspired me. I said, wow, if this man can do this, I can too. I introduced myself to him, we became friends. And from that moment on, over 30 years ago to today, to the day that he crossed over, he always shared information with me. I shared information with him. It was always a delight for me to get a call from security officers at the Museum of the American Indian where I worked. And they said, hey, George, Bobby's here. And I knew that Bobby had brought some great piece of information for me to read. It always felt like Christmas when he would show up. And that was the extent of not the extent of our relationship, but rather that was a big part of our relationship. So, question number 2, George, knowing Bobby like you do, what would be the one thing that you feel he would want us to, the community, to continue to do to keep our history, culture, and education for the next generation? Well, that would be education. See, one thing that Bobby and I had in common was that Bobby and I understood that information was never static. It's always flowing. There's always new things happening. And the more you read, the more you know. And, you know, and it was always good to read different opinions. I think that sometimes some people gravitate to some researcher or some academic that will say something that said person agrees with, and they stick to that. But it's always good to have a very broad viewpoint. And that's what me and Bobby had in common, that we like to really expand our horizons, to see more than what was being presented to us. So I would say, to answer this question, is never buy into what anybody says. Do your own research and keep on learning as much as you can. So those were the answers to my 2 questions. And I do want to say that Bobby was an inspiration for me. He was a mentor, he was a friend, he was a brother. I loved him then, I love him now, and I will love him until the day I see him again. So with that, I'll say, Han Katu, Ariko Mabu, thank you, and it's been an honor to be here.
That slide is Bobby at the Met in the Taino exhibit section, and he was invited a few times to do storytelling there for, I think it was Hispanic Heritage Month. And he would pack up whatever he was taking, and he would stand by the door and look at me and say one word. Go, showtime. I thought you'd like to know a little bit of the other side of him. But he loved it, and he would be like, I'm going to the Met. And I'm like, ooh, he's going to the Met. But inside I was bursting with joy because he would just light up. So that's the end of our panelist presentation, and because we have one less person on the program, I had asked if our 2 poets would be kind enough to grace the mic again and read a poem of their own work for us. So, whoever would like to come up first.
It was such a blessing to be loved by Bobby. He loved all of us, really, and so humbly. How he dedicated his life to teaching all of us, how we were all inspired by him. I remember we were both from the Bronx, and but from Manatí. I told him that my family's from Manatí, and he said, that's a Taino word. All of the answers, you could find them. And I started investigating and even learning about the Bronx indigenous. He inspired me to do that because we were both from the Bronx. I thought about the Bronx, and I thought about the river, and then that led to creating Bronx Indigenous, and I started doing my own gatherings, Bronx Indigenous Futurisms, and just inviting all tribes to come together and share with each other, and that, was inspired by Bobby. Um, I remember when he would talk about his puppet, the manatee puppet that he had. And my children were little at the time, and he started telling us the story, and he treated me like a little kid too. And it was just such pure passion and pride of culture. So I am so happy that I was able to read this poem to him and for him less than a year ago. And this is for Bobby. Born, raised, and memorialized in the Bronx, from the Melrose projects and a bodega storefront, this devoted son, brother, and husband, though quiet and introverted, would learn to speak out, sought across the country and the Caribbean throughout, lending his wisdom and truth about the world we live in, driven to teach the world about indigenous brilliance. While the focus remained on the First Nation trauma and oppression, he taught why Latinos are not Spanish and other valuable lessons. Shared stories with children about the manatee Matu, highlighting storytelling, preservation, and gratitude. Created meditations and poems of Taino Zen, that never to be born is the last Puerto Rican Indian. That's Bobby Gonzalez. In a world of separation, division, barriers, and walls, Bobby instilled compassion, connection, community, and inclusivity, brought together you and me with inspired intersectionality, loving personality, and passionate supporter of matriarchal wisdom, created an inseparable bond with his adored wife, Maria, encouraging and believing in her, loving and revering her. Together, they have been an example of unconditional love, and in times of sadness, they shared smiles just because. No shadow exists in a world made of light, so we honor this moment, this treasure, this life of Bobby Gonzalez, our beloved Boricua Taino griot, who brings immeasurable pride to his family, his people. Let us lift our instruments, our hands, maracas, and guiros. We were blessed to know him, Bobby, our voice of a hero.
Papoleto.
That was very, very lovely. I'm going to share a poem that I had written previously, because this poem to me speaks about, like, no matter what happens to us on this planet, to me it's really about this. This is called In a Grain of Sand. I wrote this after I was listening to a poem by William Blake called Auguries of Innocence, where he says, to see a world in a grain of sand. And that gave me pause, universal cosmic pause. and I, you know, I see where it's a message that I need to express about our experience. Because yeah, I feel like we are, and Bobby exemplified this, you know, in his own way. But I believe we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and you know that's why we want to talk to each other and connect with each other, you know, because we got information to pass. And Bobby was the person that shared information, gathered information, and shared information. And now you see how information is exploited on the internet. We're even afraid of information now. That's how powerful information is. We are star seeds, every one of us. You and me and you, and him and her, and them and they. And those who know of this are truly blessed. True for all living beings living, not humans only, but ants and trees and the open breeze. Things that breathe air or fire, water, earth, all kinds of dust and dirt, particles, a part of all a part of everything that is in everything, thus it sings. And its song is life. And life is a sea of stars, the dust of suns and moons, rocks and dust and outer space in outer smoke, floating in a bath of timelessness, counted, measured, numbered by some species, others caring not. Science and mathematics trying to plot poetry in motion, motion in a helix's curve, and life on earth becomes visible to you through the naked eye.
I haven't smiled in a long time. I haven't laughed in a long time. But tonight, you have all made me smile. You see, I believe in a strong ethic of love, kindness, friendship, and respect. And that's, I think, why we got along so well. And I have to say, from the bottom of my heart, I'm humbled tonight because I never expected to be in this beautiful theater doing something like this. And I have to thank Rosalba and her team who have worked with me step by step. Anything I needed, they gave it to me. So I would be remiss if I did not thank the Pregones team, Jessica, Ramon, Priscilla, Eduardo, Rosana, who just reminded me she was one of my students in Fordham University in the late 1990s when I first started. In the HIAP program, state-funded program for low-income first-generation students of color. It's the only reason why when they offered me the job, I said yes. And then I stayed for another 22 years, and I didn't leave until I saw diversity, inclusion, and equity with my dear friend Sophia Pertus, Dr. Pertus, who was at Fordham. So I have to throw that out there. I want to thank the panelists. Please, a round of applause for Ricardo, Regina, Robin, and because I'm a poet too, so I'm going to read a poem, but this is dedicated to my husband. And it's from my first book, Transitions of a New Eurekan Cinderella. And the story behind the title is, it was March, it was raining, Tato Laviera was still with us, and I didn't have a title for the book, and I looked at Bobby and I said, what should I call this thing? And he goes, I got one. I said, what is it? He goes, write this down, because everything with him was write this down. If I walked around the house without a pen or a piece of paper, write that down. It's a good poem. Write this down. And I said, okay, go ahead. He goes, Transition of a New Eurekan Cinderella. And I said, are you kidding me? He goes, no. I said, that's not going to work. He goes, oh, yes, it is. Ain't nobody out there using the form, the New Eurekan Cinderella. And I said, but why does it have to be Cinderella? And he goes, Nena, because you rose up from the ashes. That's the kind of person I lived with for 16 years. So husband, yes, we did have those nicknames. He would call me wife, and I would call him husband. And this is an old poem, but it's in this book. It's called A Woman's Man. It's not that he's a fabulous lover, or looks so fine in ripped t-shirts, or has bulging muscles. He's not a mantelpiece who holds my arm as we strut down the street, women casting a quick glance, wishing that they were in my shoes. No, that's not it. It's the way he holds me when I feel bad, listens to my prattle, even when I know I don't make sense. It's okay, baby. Your voice sounds like a song. He sees me, knows my smell, knows the texture of my skin, looks deep into my eyes when my eyes go deep. We walk on a beach holding hands and know we don't have to speak. It's coming home cold, hungry, tired. He cooks dinner, makes sure the sauce is just right, serves me first, pulls out my chair, gives me a flower just to celebrate my being home. He has no shame, no fear, no insecurity about being real or sensitive. Sometimes he can cry too. Go hang out with the fellas and then know when it's time to come home. Putting up with my shit, not taking it personally, because he respects me, loves me, admires my strength, wisdom, courage. He thinks I'm beautiful. This loving, that doesn't come every day. I'm so excited. We actually finished before 8:30. Thank you all for coming. You know, you can hang out and talk amongst yourselves, but the program for the evening is over. I'd like another round of applause for Papaleto, for La Bruja, for Robin, Regina, Ricardo, for Rosalba, and Pregones Theatre. Oops, and last but not least, I need to say a big thank you to Bob Sancho from Bronx Healthcare Systems, who also helped sponsor tonight's evening. You're wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.